Okay, so welcome to the deep dive. You know, when you're at the store just staring at the shelves, like all this food, is it even the same stuff our grandparents ate? It seems like such a basic question.
Yeah, it feels simple.
But, prepping for this, I realized the answer is way more complicated than a simple yes or no.
Oh, absolutely. And it goes so deep, so many layers. I mean, you're talking about how farms work, what's happening at the genetic level. It's a whole journey.
Seriously, a total journey. And that's what we're doing today, a deep dive into this whole question of how food has changed over the past, 50 years.
About that. Yep.
So we've got some awesome research, a bunch of different perspectives, and we're going to look at the big picture, like how's food grown differently, how's processing different, plus all this genetic stuff that's always in the news.
Right, because people get kind of freaked out about GMOs and all that.
Yeah, exactly. And our goal here isn't to just say, yes, it's changed, or no, it's the same. We're going to break it down, show you the differences, and the most important part, what it means for you.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, it's about what we're putting in our bodies.
100%. So let's kick things off by going back in time, like back to the 70s. Paint us a picture of what agriculture looked like back then.
Okay, picture this. 1975. Most farms were smaller, a lot of them family-run. Things were way more connected to the seasons. What you ate depended a lot on what was growing locally at that time.
Ah, the good old days, right? Like farm to table before it was a trendy thing.
Exactly. And farmers were using mostly traditional methods, stuff that had been passed down for generations.
Okay, so fast forward to today, and things look drastically different, don't they?
Night and day, honestly.
Now we have these massive farms, tons of technology. It's all about efficiency.
It's industrialized, yeah. You see huge fields all growing the same thing, single crops for miles. They're using all this heavy machinery, synthetic fertilizers, pesticides, the whole 9 yards.
And it's not just local anymore, right? We're talking global networks, food traveling thousands of miles to get to our plates.
Precisely. Become a global system, yeah. Which means for you, the food might not be as fresh, might have more chemicals, and you lose that connection to what's actually growing in your region.
It's like a trade-off, right? We get more food, maybe cheaper food, but at what cost?
That's the big question, isn't it? And part of that cost is the loss of variety. Back in the 70s, you had all these different types of crops, fruits, vegetables, grains, each with their own unique flavors and nutrients.
So basically, we traded flavor and nutrients for efficiency and quantity.
Kinda, yeah. This drive for higher yields led to focusing on just a handful of high-performing varieties that could grow quickly, resist disease, be easily shipped.
So all those heirloom tomatoes and ancient grains our grandparents raved about, they're kind of disappearing.
Well, not completely, but they're definitely harder to find. And that's a shame, because those older varieties often had special adaptations to local climates and soil conditions, things that are lost when you focus on mass production.
So that's the farming side of things. But let's get into the really juicy stuff. The genetic changes in our food. This is where things get a little sci-fi, right?
A little bit.
But it's important to understand what's actually going on. So can you break down the different types of genetic modifications for us?
Sure. The first thing to understand is the difference between traditional breeding and modern genetic engineering. Traditional breeding is something humans have been doing for, forever,
Like since the dawn of agriculture.
basically. Farmers would look at their crops or their animals and pick the ones with the best traits to breed together. Over time, they'd slowly improve things, like getting bigger corn cobs, sweeter apples, cows that give more milk.
It's like selective matchmaking for plants and animals.
You got it. And it's a natural process. It's just guiding evolution in a certain direction. But it's slow. It takes generations to see real changes.
Okay, so that's traditional. Now, what about this modern genetic engineering? It seems way more high-tech.
It is. This is where things get really precise. Starting around 1990, scientists figured out how to directly manipulate DNA.
Like cutting and pasting genes.
Exactly. They can add genes, delete genes, even edit individual genes. This lets them create plants and animals with very specific traits much faster than traditional breeding.
Like designer babies, but for food.
Kinda, yeah. A common example is making crops resistant to herbicides, so farmers can spray their fields to kill weeds without harming the crops.
That sounds super efficient. But are there any downsides?
Well, that's the big debate, isn't it? Some people worry about the long-term effects of these modifications, like unintended consequences for the environment or human health.
It's like we're messing with nature and we don't fully understand the consequences.
Right, and that's why GMOs are so controversial.
So where do we see these genetically modified crops? Are they in everything?
They're pretty common, especially in the US, South America, and India. Soybeans, corn, cotton, canola, a, a lot of those are genetically modified.
Wow, I had no idea. What about Europe? Are they on board with this?
Not really. Europe, and particularly Switzerland, are much more cautious about GMOs. They have strict regulations, even bans on growing certain genetically modified crops.
So even if you live in a country that's anti-GMO, you might still be eating them.
It's possible. Processed foods can contain ingredients derived from GMOs grown elsewhere, like soy lecithin, which is in tons of stuff, even chocolate.
It's kind of mind-blowing how complex this all is.
It really is.
Okay, so we've talked about plants. What about animal products? Have they gone through similar changes?
Oh yeah, big time. One of the biggest shifts is the rise of factory farming. Back in the 70s, most animals were raised on smaller farms, often with access to pasture.
Like the idyllic images of cows grazing in open fields.
Exactly. But today, the majority of meat, eggs, and dairy come from large-scale, intensive operations.
Where animals are basically living in crowded warehouses.
Yeah, it's not the most humane system. And it's not just the living conditions. The food these animals eat has also changed drastically.
So what are they eating? I doubt they're munching on grass all day.
It's usually specially formulated feed, often made from things like genetically modified soy and corn. This can actually affect the nutritional quality of the meat, eggs, and milk we consume.
Interesting. So the food we eat is influenced by what the animals we eat are eating.
Exactly. It's a chain reaction.
Okay, so now let's move on to the final stage of the journey, processing. This is where things get really interesting because it seems like everything is processed these days.
It's true. And it's a huge difference from 50 years ago. Back then, people ate more whole foods, things they cooked themselves from scratch.
Like grandma's homemade apple pie.
Exactly. But today, our diets are dominated by processed foods. Ready meals, packaged snacks, sugary drinks, they're everywhere. And they're loaded with additives.
And when we say additives, what are we talking about specifically?
Oh, all sorts of things. Preservatives to make food last longer, artificial colors to make it look more appealing, artificial flavors to enhance taste.
So basically, stuff that tricks our senses into thinking the food is better than it actually is.
You could say that. And then there are stabilizers and emulsifiers to improve texture, flavor enhancers like MSG, the list goes on.
It's like a chemistry experiment in our food.
Sometimes it feels that way. And beyond these individual additives, you have what are now called ultra-processed foods.
Ultra-processed? That sounds even worse. What makes them different?
Think of it like this. An additive is like adding salt to your soup. An ultra-processed food is like buying a pre-made soup with dozens of ingredients you can't even pronounce.
Okay, that's a helpful analogy. So it's not just about adding a pinch of this or that. It's about creating entirely new foods from industrial ingredients.
Exactly. Like those chicken nuggets that are shaped like dinosaurs. They're a far cry from an actual chicken.
It's kind of disturbing when you think about it. So with all these changes in how we grow, raise, and process our food, what are the implications for our health and the environment?
Well, there are a lot of concerns. Some experts believe that modern crop varieties, like the high-gluten wheat we have today, might be contributing to the rise in allergies and food sensitivities.
That's scary. So our food could be making us sick.
It's a possibility. And then there's the issue of nutrient depletion. Studies have shown that fruits and vegetables today may contain fewer vitamins and minerals than they did 50 years ago.
Why is that? Are we just not farming as well as we used to?
It's partly due to soil depletion. Intensive farming practices can strip the soil of essential nutrients. And then there's the fact that our food travels so far, it's often picked before it's fully ripe and loses nutrients during storage and transport.
It's like we're prioritizing quantity over quality.
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. And then there are the environmental impacts. The industrial food system is a major contributor to climate change, deforestation, biodiversity loss, pollution, you name it.
It's like we're eating our way to a dying planet.
It's a pretty bleak picture, but it's important to be aware of these issues.
So, in this modern food landscape, is it even possible to find those natural, wholesome foods our grandparents enjoyed?
It's definitely harder, but not impossible. You have to be a more conscious consumer. Seek out organic foods, heritage varieties, shop at farmers markets, things like that.
So it's about being proactive, doing your research, and making informed choices.
Exactly. And supporting movements like permaculture, biodynamic farming, and slow food, which are all pushing for more sustainable and ethical food systems.
Okay, so to wrap things up, can we definitively say that the food we eat today is different from the food our grandparents ate?
I think the evidence is pretty clear. Food today is more processed, more standardized, and more influenced by technology than ever before.
And what are some of the biggest trade-offs we've made in this pursuit of modern food?
Well, for consumers, it's a trade-off between convenience and quality. We have more choices, but those choices are often less nutritious and less flavorful. And for farmers, it's a trade-off between independence and efficiency. They're often trapped in a system that prioritizes profit over sustainability.
It sounds like the food industry is the real winner in all of this.
They've certainly benefited from these changes. They have more control over the food supply, and they've created a system that encourages us to eat more processed foods, which are more profitable for them.
So it's like a vicious cycle. But is there any hope for breaking free?
I think there is, but it requires a shift in mindset. We need to start valuing quality over quantity, sustainability over profit, and health over convenience.
Easier said than done, right?
It won't be easy. But the more we understand about our food system, the more empowered we are to make positive changes.
So to all our listeners out there, the next time you're at the grocery store, take a moment to think about where your food came from, how it was produced, and what impact it has on your health and the environment.
And here's a final question to ponder. What's one thing you can change about your own food choices to make a positive difference? It might be something small, but every little bit counts.
That's all for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.